I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Duncan Brown, who is an independent rewards researcher and advisor, as well as being a principal associate at IES and a visiting professor at the University of Greenwich. And we're here, I guess, to talk about employee well-being, but really in its broadest possible sense. And the three broad areas that we're going to cover in this video today is total reward, the role of well-being, and cost of living needs. So, Duncan, people have been banding around the term total reward for many years now. I think you and I have been talking about it for at least 20 years, which is quite scary to think about in itself. And I was reading your recent paper on total reward, which is to add for our viewers, if anybody'd like to download that paper for free, it is in the REBA.global reports and guides library, available for free. In that paper, Duncan, you talk about how the concept of total reward has strayed really far from its original meaning, and perhaps employers need to think carefully about it and what it means for them and how they use it. So I want to put that back to you. What do we mean by total reward now in 2022? Has it lost its meaning? Is it the wrong concept for us to be relying on? What's happened?
Well, good morning, Debbie, and thanks very much for asking me in for an official chat on video rather than just one of our regular chats anyway. Yeah, I guess it probably the sort of reflection I've had, and similar to everyone else in COVID, you haven't had a lot of time to think too much about issues. We've been so responding to the crisis. But total reward, I guess, it was really looking at just material on corporate websites, etc. And then discussions with employees, you kind of think, well, do they feel totally rewarded at the moment? And you and I have a bit of history on this, because I think in a previous life, you covered a bit of questioning that I did about 10 years ago after the 2008 crash, where I'm kind of saying, well, if I mention total rewards in an employee focus group, I kind of need a crash helmet. If you try it at the moment with any group of employees, most of them are not feeling totally rewarded. So there's that kind of common sense that, look, maybe we don't want to emphasize that at the moment when we're all facing huge cost of living increases, and maybe a different terminology is appropriate. But I think then when you think about it more deeply, I think there's two aspects. One is that environment, which now, maybe we've seen a permanent change. So do we just want to go back to pre-COVID, total reward, wonderful total reward strategies, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we don't, maybe things have changed. And I think one of the biggest changes has been COVID. And we've seen there, the emphasis has not been on, total reward was about individualization, it was about choice, etc. What's come out of COVID is fantastic work by, your members, my colleagues and friends, but typically addressing the collective security of people, not an individual choice to maximize how much reward I've got. And then having done some research for NHS employers, where we looked at the academic research on the area going right back, you get two things come out. One, the academics hate the term because they say, what does it mean? All these employers with different characteristics, different reward policies, and yet they all call them total reward. And secondly, does it have any impact on anything? Does it affect employee attitudes? Does it affect employee performance or corporate performance? No, you can't get any relationships. So I think it, starting out as hey, you might just not want to use it at the moment too loudly, to kind of more deeply thinking, is it appropriate going forward? If you think about what you've learned from COVID and what's your emphasis in your reward strategy, is that really about maximizing personal rewards? And there are aspects of it which are like the working environment. It's good to not just think about pay, I was a big fan. I was going around in the 1990s with books on total reward. But I just think a bit more reflection and really thinking, is it appropriate for you? And I think for more and more employers, I did it with a big overseas aid charity a few years ago, where we just decided, complete redesign of the recruitment offer, etc. We don't want to call it total reward. That's not why people come to work for a big overseas aid charity. So I think we called it employment proposition before the kind of EVP had really gone, but they were seeing it more as employment terms and conditions. I think that was probably how their board saw it. But we just, in a way, we just wanted to get it off the table and let people, just give them what they needed, maybe the minimum we could afford, and then let them get on with their jobs. So not a kind of total reward grand strategy.
Yeah, so it's interesting you've talked there about the EVP, because the more I hear about people talking about the employer value proposition, the more I'm thinking, isn't that the total reward we used to talk about? The workplace, the learning and development, the pay, the benefits, and how you bring it all together. And now it's just called EVP. Or am I right? Do you think EVP is the new total reward, or is it something else?
Well, I think that's kind of, you gave me that brilliant challenge, which is if you're not going to call it all this stuff that we do and provide to our employees to hopefully maximize their performance and maximize their personal experience of work, what do we call it then? That's a great question. And I think we've seen a whole range of terms pre-COVID, the employee experience, coming out of the sort of engagement survey world. I think some employers have picked that up. And I think EVP, although it's word's a bit of a mouthful, I like it a lot. One, it puts the emphasis more on what do employees value, as well as what we're offering. And it's still getting at what that proposition is. It's not just pay. I think the EVP potentially is one that suits some employers. And I really like this bringing together different expertise, which in a way was what Total Rewards was trying to do, was bring those things together. So we're providing the strongest offer and communicating that. And that's likely to get us the best employees doing their best for us. The trouble was it kind of got it just became meaningless because so many people are using it just without thinking about it. And it got operationalized in a once a year choice from a menu a flex benefits menu that people were pretty bored with. They kind of ignored.
We in Reward and HR, even business, I think, are very good about thinking we've discovered something completely new. And over probably the last 6 years, maybe 7 years, suddenly employee well-being has become the catchphrase, has become the big focus for employers. And rightly so. I'm not being disparaging about it, but it's almost like we've discovered it for the first time. Total Reward is out. We got EVP and we got total well-being, or employee well-being is suddenly the in thing. So, Duncan, I know this is probably slightly something I focus on more in my work than you do, but I still want to get your view. What is the role of employee well-being? Is that the new total reward?
So I think well-being is a good term, but I think using it without health associated with it, and it's the kind of individual components. I like it used more, health and well-being, financial well-being, the different aspects of it, be that provided internally or through your EAP.
That's a really good point, Duncan, that you make there, and you linking that well-being with financial or with health. So again, the conversation that we've had within the last 2 or 3 years, and we've talked about employee welfare. And I know you felt quite passionately that, this isn't new. Employee well-being, employee welfare, isn't that what we used to have before? Why would you prefer to use the term employee welfare? What's stronger about that than employee well-being?
Well, again, I think it probably reflects your workforce, Debi. But I think if you've got a large number of lower skilled, lower paid workers, of course, providing them with the wellbeing benefits is and financial advice, etc., and support is key. But I think that level of security is really important. And welfare, they say CIPD started out as the Institute of Welfare Workers. The IWW was its first name in the early 20th century. And that, protection of employees from, initially providing housing, etc., but also then from the effects of what the work conditions and getting RSI working on a production line at Ford or whatever it was. And again, today, I think the potential impact of some of the, I think the emphasis on well-being, ironically, has kind of highlighted that maybe we have been emphasizing some of the superficial aspects and not getting some of the underlying causes of ill health and mental stress, bad management, bad organizations, design, bad facilities, all of those areas, which, yes, of course, the individual programs and provisions are important. But welfare, I think, pays much more to, a definition around protection of people and meeting their minimum or reasonable or respectful material needs. And of course, we've seen a fantastic growth in emphasis on a living wage. Why are we paying people just a legal minimum if it's not enough to live on by a reasonably well-defined definition of what you need to live a reasonable existence?
That makes complete sense. And I really like the term welfare. It's incredibly caring. And if we can at least bring those principles into well-being, we might be getting somewhere. And I think that comes back to what you said earlier about this. Sometimes it's the superficial things. It can be easy when budgets are tight for a benefits manager, a reward manager, and there's only one of you in a team and it's part of a broader job to do the easy stuff. It's actually the hardest stuff underneath. As you said, it's job design, organizational design, management, where you need a bigger buy-in from the business to make that change. And well-being is not going to work, just as welfare wouldn't work without doing the hard stuff. Yeah. And then if you do the hard stuff well, it really works. Duncan, what do you think cost of living demands? How will that change the emphasis when it comes to reward and benefits? Is the emphasis all going to go back on pay? We've had years and years where we've been in a low pay economy, a 0 hours economy. Will that start to be reversed? Can it be reversed as we hit quite tough buffers at the moment?
Well, I think the trade union official, I think, who notoriously said, I don't want total reward, give me the pay. But he probably is feeling correct at the moment. So I think whatever your reward offer, having a decent, reasonable base pay guaranteed level and covering both base pay and hours, because obviously if your hours are, you don't know what you're working with this week, your base pay isn't fixed either. I think that becomes the absolute minimum now. And I think the pressure on people, it's a tough, I think people giving up pension contributions to boost their pay. Yeah, I know you feel uncomfortable about that. And I think, again, if you see evidence of that in your workforce, I think for me, that's really raising questions about, are pay levels right? And people got a decent understanding of the pension situation. But yeah, I think, funny enough, this morning's employment figures and pay figures, which show a big jump in earnings, I'm kind of really happy because I think, at least it's closing the gap. And whereas HR and reward professionals, maybe, the last 20 years, the way to get on has been to, keep costs down, keep that pay award down. You go in and celebrate if you got low pay awards. And God, I've given plenty of advice to against staff and trade union demands for excessive awards. But at the moment, I think we really need to look at this as investment. And let's invest in our people, A, to protect them, but B, the evidence is very good that not only if you pay people a living wage, you get the return on that, you get lower absenteeism, You get more positive employee attitudes coming to work. But actually, if you're providing progression opportunities in all levels of work, that you get a really significant return on that. And so I think that whole area of progression, it's not just what's your lowest pay level and how many folk have you got on it, but how can you progress up? You know, everyone's complaining about the talent war. What was it? Unemployment down to 3.7%. We've got shortages in just about every I think we have in every, if you look at the ONS breakdown, every occupational group, we've got shortages. It's remarkable. And yet, you know, we're still going out saying, oh, for IT workers, you know, I need a 13% pay increase, and the line managers are coming to your members saying that. And it's like, yeah, but instead, I mean, again, a business school professor head was saying, you know, they're paying market supplements to recruit in some areas of 80K. And I kind of said to him, well, if you actually picked some female, predominantly junior professors and invested 80K in their development, goodness me, that could maybe have a really huge impact in terms of their growth and development and contribution to your organization. So I think sort of protection, pay and progression is really key.
But it feels like, Duncan, again, we're in that, it's time for a mindset change. You talked about, you know, investing in female talent or any talent that's underpaid, underdeveloped, and we know that there is a gender pay gap, because we've also got what is being termed the million worker gap. So we've had 500,000 people over 50 fall out of the workplace. Some might come back when they see the cost of living crisis, but they're not there that would normally be there. And we've got about 500,000 people that would have been foreign nationals working in the UK that aren't there anymore. That's 1 million people out of the workforce. So the idea that you can go out and get that highly skilled IT person, whatever it is, that's not hiding to nothing. You're just going to be ratcheting up pay.
Yeah.
We've got to think about this completely differently and look to develop different talent. We've also not got as many young people coming in the workforce as we do. This has all been predicted for years and years and years. We're at that point now. It's a time for a mindset rethink. And part of that is pay and how you do your pay. But I know you were keen also to talk about variable pay, because we talk about flexibility a lot and hybrid working and flexible hours. But what about rethinking that pay and also, and variable pay? Is that an area also to have a look at, how you manage that?
Well, I think the ONS figures this morning that show whatever it is, the 4.2 increase in fixed pay and 7% in variable pay, clearly that's where employers are getting a lot of flexibility, which is great to boost their employees' earnings, but in a way that they can afford and is self-funded. And I think it's, rather maybe than individual PRP and executive incentives, what's got a really nice kick from COVID as being collective. But, we're all in this together. What chief executive at the start of COVID didn't say we're all in this together? And yet reward-wise, the last 30 years, it's been the opposite. There's been growing differentials, higher pay and better conditions at the top, lower pay and worsening conditions at the bottom. And I think that's been hopefully blown apart now. Okay, there's still individual examples, P&O or whatever, that, but that model is still around. The cost minimization model is still around. Maybe we don't see it as much in your members or the folks that I'm working with, but that's still, there's still argument. We've got to argue against that, I think. But no, there's real. I think everyone's recognised the benefits in collective bonuses, and you've seen amazing examples like Richard Sounds and Go Ape, where they're pretty much given the business to employees. But I think the Employee Ownership Association say the number of members has gone up from 550 to 800 or something during COVID. But more widely, kind of collective profit sharing, bonus schemes. I've done a couple of public sector and charity ones, interesting. And the collective emphasis goes across really well. But I think the wider point, Debbie, is, and you guys have covered this so well, is, again, we've really got diversity inclusion. I know we've been talking about it and we've been running training course or whatever. But I think we've really got it. I think it's one of your stats that sick pay, guess what? We've seen significant improvements and during COVID, and most people have said they're not going to reverse them, although we've seen a few examples that have. But I think the commonest change has been harmonisation. So we've got our executives sitting, working at home, totally safe with private medical cover, etc. And frontline employees right on the front end of risk of getting COVID have got, whatever SSP, whatever it was, 96 now, 99 quid a week. I mean, how can anyone live on that? As a nation, it's disgraceful. And, I think it's highlighted that have a look. Can you really, tell your kids about your company's sick pay plan? What do they think of that? Are you, still allowing negotiation over salaries in recruitment situations? Because there's tons of evidence that ends up being discriminatory against women. Why aren't you banning salary history discussions? Are you still implementing 0 hours contracts? All of these questions, I think, although, let's change our target from total reward sounds quite philosophical and, let's have our 3-year strategy, which I'm also saying, but I think there's some real practical implications as well. Are you just giving financial well-being support to senior people? Are you providing it more generally? These are all big questions, I think, that is a good legacy of COVID.
Yes, I think that there is, and as you're talking, it comes back to welfare in the broader sense, genuine welfare. Are you paying them enough? Is there fairness across the organisation? Are you properly supporting your lower paid with the financial well-being, not just your top execs? And because of the crunches that we are now facing with low unemployment, with high inflation, the power is with the employee, is going to force employers to think differently. And I think those employers who do it well, who grasp the nettle and do the tough stuff, will win out in the war for talent. That's the way it should be. It's never perfect. It's never smooth. It's always going to be different. But who wants to work for the likes of companies that sack their employees with no notice or treat them badly? And to me, that's proper well-being. As well as the massages on a Friday and so on. The actual stuff comes down to pay and how you work and what your environment is. So as ever, the clock has beaten us, Duncan. So much to discuss. We could be talking for another hour here. So there's just so many shifts and changes. But hopefully I can get you back at some point and we can see how things progress in the future. But for right now, I just want to say a huge big thank you to you for taking part in this video linked to the 2022 Employee Wellbeing Congress. And anybody who's watching the video who wants to watch any of our other videos from the Congress, we will put the link at the end of the video. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Debbie. Thank you. And, you guys have done an amazing job in bringing people together during COVID, and you're giving us great information at the moment. So thanks very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you.